My name is Kevin. I will be your host. With me today is Jordan. He will be your co-host. And we're going to be going over, just as CJ said, we're going to be going over cybersecurity. How fresh are your fundamentals? We're going over basics just to kind of give you an idea of what kind of red flags to be looking for, what kind of hackers there are out there. And we're going to be talking a lot about social engineering, which is just a lot more about manipulation as far as deceit and trying to acquire information through fraudulent means. And a lot of people, when they think about cybersecurity, they think about a lot of really high tech stuff, whether it's the firewalls or the actual hackers and, the way they're using Kali Linux and all this other stuff. But it can also be really simplistic. Cybersecurity can really be as simple as making sure you have a strong password, not letting someone in the building. Just little things like that, avoiding suspicious links, don't download attachments and such. So there's a lot of little things that you can do to make sure that you're keeping your network safe today without a whole lot of technical knowledge. I have DNS as the very first definition of key terms we're going to be going over. So this resolves IP to the domain name, because you see whenever you're going to your browser, you're typing in google.com, your Facebook, whichever website, the internet actually has no idea what the human language is. It knows numbers. So what it's actually doing is it's taking the name that we're typing in, the domain name, and it's changing it into an IP. So the internet knows, oh, that's what you're looking for, and it sends us to the right web page. If someone were to go in and poison that or do something with it, it can cause all kinds of routing problems, or even send you to malicious websites, and that is a very dangerous thing for it to happen, because that's when they can steal your credit card information, your credentials, any kind of personal data that would be of value. Our next key term is farming. It's an alternative means of redirecting you from a legitimate website to a malicious one. Actually, a good example of that, it's back in 2017, Microsoft, so very big company, no one's safe. They were exploited. Hackers found a vulnerability which actually allowed them to mimic several bank websites. This basically caused that a lot of users, whenever they would go to that website, they would type in their information, and well, they were subjected to what's called a Trojan horse. It's a type of virus. So they used a metaphorical Trojan horse to download an actual Trojan horse. No fun. There's like 3,000 people that got affected, and this is all over the course of about 3 days. So it does not take very long to cause mass damage. BEC. This is a very common term. It's business email compromise. It's pretty much, so this one's pretty self-explanatory. This one is a type of scam that is done over email. It targets businesses. There are various examples of this attack, and we'll be going over one of them as we discuss the arsenal that hackers bring to the table. Firewalls. A lot of people think about firewalls in a very abstract way. The truth is that there are a lot of types. It can be hardware, it can be software. There's various kinds. The main function of it, though, is that it's monitoring and controlling the incoming and outgoing traffic to make sure that whatever goes out and comes in is safe and legitimate, and not something that is malicious. Firewalls are very important to have for your network. It's how you isolate things like the DMZ, protect specific users, information, data. It's something you very much want to make sure is readily handy. And spoofing is going to be our final key term. It's simply when you're disguising one computer resource as another. Spoofing is a very common technique that's used during phishing, and phishing is something that we'll actually be discussing here momentarily as well. It is a type of attack, but it's basically when you're making like one website look like another, or you're looking, or an email address or phone number that looks like it should be legitimate, or looks like the legitimate version of it, but it's not. It's usually very, very minor things that might be off that could trigger a red flag. So it's really one of those things you want to make sure you're paying lots and lots of attention.
Spoofing is really interesting because it is such a wide type of hacks, so to say. It can range anywhere from getting a fraudulent email claiming to be somebody that they're not, which is part of phishing, as Kevin said, or it can be something as simple as you're sitting at Starbucks and you're trying to join the free Wi-Fi so you can get some work done, send some emails, and you join Starbucks_Wi-Fi thinking that it's a totally legitimate website, and next thing you know, you could potentially have a keylogger on your machine that's tracking every word or number that you type in, bank accounts, passwords, etc. Spoofing is a very common delivery method for multiple types of hacks, predominantly because it can be hard to identify without the trained eye.
Absolutely. Great addition. He's absolutely right. There's so much versatility to this type of attack. It's really just, it can come at you in all kinds of ways.
So the next thing we're going to talk about is social engineering. Social engineering is pretty vague. Really, it can extend beyond the cybersecurity world, but for our purposes, really how we want to define it is as manipulation or hacking of people, right? Of you. It's particularly revolving around deceiving individuals to obtain confidential personal information. And as the slide says, the versatility of it is really only limited by your imagination. Social engineering can be something as simple as we talked about with spoofing, manipulating somebody into entering their credit card credentials into a fake website. Another popular use is another application you could say is in the instance of a phishing attack where somebody is manipulating you into thinking, oh, that's my CEO and they want me to send them a $25 Amazon gift card. I should get right on that. Obviously we don't want to, get in trouble. So social engineering is extremely vague. It's really any type of manipulation. It's pretty straightforward in that aspect. One interesting application for social engineering is human curiosity. Not too long ago, it's become less commonplace now because it's easy to just deactivate USBs on machines and put other precautions in place. But not long ago, there used to be this big campaign about, hey, don't plug in USB drives that you find on the ground. No matter what curiosity might overtake you, there's no reason for you to plug in that machine into or that USB into your network. This particularly comes into play when you're talking about what's called an air-gapped network, which essentially is disconnected entirely from the World Wide Web. An interesting little tidbit that you could research outside of this was the Stuxnet hack in Iran. And the long and short of it was an air-gapped network at a nuclear enrichment facility. And somehow this malware called Stuxnet was able to get past that. And common belief is that it was an infiltration event. Obviously, when you're talking about nation state type stuff, it's much bigger than somebody trying to get your email password. However, the common consensus is that it could have been something as simple as just a USB drive that was loaded with the malware and was easily brought inside the network, and then maybe somebody just plugged it into a computer. Next thing you know, you're owned. This kind of just talks a little more about social engineering. We kind of went over it. Social engineering can tend to be easier for a lot of people because even though we've had technology and access to computers and networking for quite a long time now, there's still a lot of people that aren't always up to snuff. It's a very dense line of training and knowing and knowledge. So maybe you don't know what's new. So it's easier for a lot of hackers to manipulate people and prey on maybe our lack of knowledge than it is sometimes to attack networking appliances or computers or any other device you could really think of.
Absolutely. And actually, just to add a little bit to that, it's not even always a virtual thing. And you could have someone who maybe receives an email from Jordan and they see, Jordan TechLab Manager. So they walk into the office and they go to the receptionist like, hey, Jordan called me over. He wanted me to come fix this, this such and such task. Can you go ahead and, let me in so I can do that? And the receptionist thinking, oh, he clearly knows who he's talking about, what he's got to do. Let me go ahead and let me do that. And so it's really important to remember that, this is why we talk about it's really just manipulation, because it's not just virtual. This can be done in person, over the phone, over email, anything. So you want to make sure you're being vigilant at just basically at all times.
Yeah, and you actually just mentioned one of the big reasons why it works. Authority is a big part of it. Impersonating somebody that has authority, going back to the CEO example, you don't want to accidentally send an email to your CEO saying, are you sure you really want a $25 gift card? You want to run out and take care of that issue, right?
Absolutely.
So that authority kind of tricks something in our brain that says, oh, I should really get on this and not ask too many questions because I know this name, I know this person. A really great example of authority abuse was during the Ethereum Classic hack back in 2017. Ethereum Classic is a type of cryptocurrency, which in 2017 their website got hacked. Using social engineering, hackers were able to impersonate the owner of the Ether wallet, which was allowed them to gain access to the domain registry, and then they just redirected their domain to their own private server. So people were going in, making their deposits, throwing money at it, buying tokens, and really the money was just going into a black hole of some bad actor. Another big thing is intimidation. This is the one that comes in, I feel like a lot of people nowadays have at least seen this email where you get this spam email and it says, oh, we have, video evidence of you doing something naughty. If you don't, give us five Bitcoin in 24 hours, we're going to send it to everybody on your contacts list. That's intimidation, clear cut. They're trying to intimidate you or force you to do something that you don't want to do. This also comes into play with scam phone calls and robocallers. When you get those calls right after you got your stimulus check and it says, this is the IRS and there's a problem with the stimulus check. We need you to call and give us your social security number. It's the same concept. It doesn't, as Kevin said, social engineering is not a thing that's confined to the world of cybersecurity. It comes down to all security. And then consensus. This is just an instance of, lots of people agreeing with the same thing. Oh, this is obviously a good thing to do. A good example of this is sometimes you'll find a video on YouTube where there's a lot of comments that maybe don't seem necessarily like they came from people, but they're all saying the same thing. So when you see these things repeated, oh, I donated to this charity, right? And you don't do any background check to look at this charity to see, what it's about. And you see this all over YouTube, that's consensus social engineering. You think to yourself, oh, well, if everybody's doing it, then I don't see why it wouldn't be okay to donate to this charity. I love dogs, so I want to take care of them. And really all you're doing is donating to somebody who is a bad actor and is just trying to take advantage and prey on your empathy in that specific example.
Absolutely.
And then trust. It's another one that preys on your good nature. You see a lot of these come down to just kind of tricking your brain and taking advantage of you as an individual as opposed to, what your computer does. A lot of that stuff is, just creating some sort of falsehood. And sometimes it's very targeted towards you as an individual if they've done their background work, and something it's as simple as, I really need you to take care of this, or I need you to give me this money so I can free up my, lost funds because I've been excommunicated from my country or whatever the case may be. You feel bad for that fictional person if you don't necessarily identify that this is something that you're being taken advantage of. You want to talk to us, Kevin, a little bit about what kind of arsenal hackers are starting to bring to the table?
Absolutely. And I mean, there's so many different kinds of weapons and cyber attacks that are out there. We're only covering really just a fraction of them. But again, this is just to give you some fundamentals and just to kind of give you an idea of what to look for. So one of a particularly common attack it's called phishing. This is something that most people are aware of. You get an email. It's basically, the term is actually from, like when you're going fishing with fish. It's basically an attacker who's sending out emails or setting up traps, and they're waiting for people to click something, download something, someone to fall into this trap. They are trying to obtain sensitive data through fraudulent means. So, they might set up a phishing website where once you actually click on the website, maybe you think you're going to LinkedIn and it looks just like it. The login screen, everything's exactly the same. In fact, some of them are so good that if you actually take the phishing website and you take the actual real legitimate website and you put them side by side, they are identical. The only real difference that you can see is just a lot of times it's going to be in the URL. You'll see where one of them actually just says, linkedin.com, and it'll have the little lock in the corner to show that it's using HTTPS as a secure website. And you might see even something similar with the phishing site, but it maybe LinkedIn is spelled wrong, or maybe there's a slash something on the end that shouldn't be there. It's often very subtle things that to the untrained eye, it's so easy to miss. And they're just waiting for you to click that link, go to this website that you're sure is absolutely correct because it must be, it looks perfect. And then you log in and now they've got your credentials and now they're using your account to do things. There have been all kinds of hacks. There was a hack of, I think, Twitter actually not too long ago. It might have been even last year. They sent out tweets from very big political figures, even including like Obama and former presidents and such. I mean, again, it just goes to show that no one is safe from a simple cyber attack. And I'm essentially, phishing. I mean, again, there's different kinds of phishing. You have phishing with a V, which is where someone calls you over the phone. Someone calls and they're like, hey, my boss is going to kill me. I really need you to help me out with this, so you feel for this person. They're using, they're using authority because they're from some entity. They're referencing some kind of authority because their boss is going to be there. They're using intimidation because if you don't help them, there's going to be a penalty. They're using trust because they're appealing to your human nature to want to help someone who's in need. And so that's where you have that mix of different social engineering techniques, along with spoofing, which we mentioned earlier, which you're just changing one resource, which is a malicious website, into another resource that looks like a legitimate website, even though it's not. So again, lots of methods to be able to attack people through just phishing that we really have to be careful of.
Yeah, this can come like Kevin had alluded to. It comes in multiple different types of mediums. I actually saw a LinkedIn post this afternoon that I thought would be relevant to bring up. There's a new way that people are trying to get to you beyond just your business email. The post that I saw in particular showed, and I think I've actually gotten this before in the past, a text message that said, there's been a delay with your Amazon package, and then provided some tracking number that vaguely looked like a UPS tracking number to me, and said, click the link and log in to proceed. And so if you were to click on that link, I almost guarantee you that it would pull up a fake Amazon login where you would type in your credentials to your Amazon account, which I would hope is attached to your credit card or your debit card, whatever the case may be. And now they have access to that. And next thing you know, you're the proud owner of 7,000 mouse pads. And you don't even know when you bought it. And you're like, man, I just had too much wine last night. I mean,
late night Amazon orders, man, they're risky.
So that's just a really good example. It kind of comes at you from all angles these days. So a good rule of thumb with phishing that I always try to tell everybody here, as well as our customers, is if you aren't expecting it, it's probably not legitimate. It's very rare today that you're going to receive notification of something outside of some automations that you're not expecting. Take a few moments, check the headline. Who's it from? Is it from, Amazon, AMAIZON.com? Because if so, that's not who you think it is. Are the graphics, do they look right? Is it Amazon's logo from 2010, or is it their modern updated logo? These little tiny details are what can help really kind of prevent some sort of big disaster for you.
Malware is another very common kind of attack. This is something that it's software. It's been designed to interfere, disable, or damage your computer's functionality or network. Malware is something that's often used in conjunction with other things. So you might get a phishing email with an attachment, and that attachment is the malware. So there's lots of methods of delivery, whether it's someone, you kind of like Jordan mentioned earlier, maybe someone plugged in a USB stick and they use that to be able to transfer the malware from the USB stick to the machine. Whether it could be an email, it could be a link that someone sent you over social media, or whatever the case is. It's a very common type of attack, very destructive, and there are things that you can protect against it. Firewalls, with certain types of firewalls like Norton things, antivirus and such that'll help with that. But a lot of times it's kind of like regular medicine. If there's damage already being done, it may be too late. So these are things you want to make sure you're always thinking proactively and preventatively.
Yeah, so just to kind of tie it all together, a great example of malware is just coming from the 2013 Target breach. The vector of delivery for that particular hack was phishing. Shocker, because it's one of the biggest and easiest ways to target people. They used phishing, the hackers used phishing to gain access to 40 million customers' payment information that Target had stored on their servers. It was simply a phishing email. Somebody clicked it, said, oh, this looks legitimate, opened it. There's a social engineering component. And suddenly there was malware that was able to sit quiet and collect information on target servers and send it somewhere that wasn't supposed to go. And that's pretty significant. In the public sector these days, a lot of you'll see this a very similar story to this in municipalities like cities and states having some sort of breach. New Orleans got hit with ransomware, which Kevin's going to talk to us about here really soon, as well as, I believe Atlanta got hit, Knoxville just got hit, our hometown here at RCN not too long ago. It's a pretty big deal. And to be clear, ransomware is a part of malware. Malware is kind of a big blanket term. You could actually say that a virus is malware. And all malware stands for is malicious software. So pretty much anything that you can imagine that falls under hacks would probably fall under malware, as long as there is a software component to it.
Absolutely. And ransomware, as Jordan mentioned, is a type of malware. And this is more designed to basically, it disrupts the system in the way that malware does, but it's usually done for the purpose of a ransom. So someone goes in, they take your data, and then they tell you, hey, if you don't want us to release this over the internet, then pay us this much money. And if you don't pay it, then, well, they follow through and they cause damage to your personal security, to your company security, and all kinds of things. There's a perfect example of this. There was an insurance company. They're located out in the Middle East. They're called Sherbet Insurance. The hackers actually, they demanded 50 Bitcoin, and I'm not as good with cryptocurrency. How much is that in dollars?
Today, it's a lot. Bitcoin's trading around $40,000 per Bitcoin today.
See, there
Back
you go.
in that time, it would have been a little less. Sure.
Still, it's still plentiful. So when you take that amount of thousands times 50, you can imagine it's not exactly something that we all just have sit in our back pocket. And they basically told them, they're like, if you don't give us this money, then we're going to share your company's sensitive client information. Well, Sherbet they didn't follow through. They didn't pay the ransom. And so the hackers went in and they actually released a massive portion of that to do the damage that they said that they were going to do. There was only a bit of it that wasn't released. And it's mostly just because I think the theory is that that information was sold. And which is another possibility. Rather than just releasing it to everyone, they can sell that information to someone else who was also malicious. So, I mean, you could be attacked once and then your information gets sold to someone else, and then that person's going to attack you too. I mean, again, you don't want that. You don't want to get ganged up on when it comes to cybersecurity attacks. That's not fun.
And what's interesting is ransomware has actually been around for a very long time. The first iteration of ransomware that we know of was from back in the 90s. However, ransomware didn't get truly interesting for black hat hackers up until the advent of two things. That's MoneyGrams and cryptocurrency. Being able to anonymously transfer currency from unsuspecting prey, which is us, and the black hat hackers. Once that method of delivery was hammered out for them, ransomware exploded. It is one of the most popular forms of attacks today. Again, coinciding with phishing being the method of delivery, ransomware being the actual payload. And it affects everybody. Ransomware used to just affect individuals. They were targeting, grandma and grandpa who never back up their personal photos on their computer, if they have them there at all, and prey on that fear of, I don't want to lose these precious family memories. And then they went on to enterprises. They started attacking enterprises. And now, believe it or not, ransomware is really affecting the SMB market predominantly because black hat hackers have realized that enterprise businesses had the liquid funds and budget to be able to beef up when ransomware started getting popular. A lot of SMBs didn't take that same opportunity when the warning signs were coming. So ransomware is a huge deal. I would very much implore you to do some research on large-scale ransomware attacks. You'd be surprised the list of companies and municipalities that are on that list. Obviously, we don't have time to go through it right now, but it really is astounding. And oftentimes the damage is irreversible in the case of maybe poor backups or leaked confidential information that you trust these entities, whether they're governmental or business, to keep secure.
Logic bombs. These are actually interesting. So this is basically malicious code. They're inserted into a system, and they're triggered when certain conditions are met. And those conditions can be whatever the actual, like whoever coded this this particular set of code. It's the trigger can be whatever they want, and the attack can be essentially whatever they want. So, and it could be something as simple as maybe a disgruntled employee. They inserted a logic bomb into the system so that if they were ever terminated, it just starts deleting really sensitive files. And there's really no way to know that it's there, because until it's triggered, it's completely dormant, it's benign. And so if that trigger never occurs, then the bomb never goes off. But if it does, it could be absolutely disastrous. And logic bombs, more often than not, that's going to be an internal actor. It's going to be someone from within the organization who has access to be able to just leave it somewhere in the system for it to go off should the conditions be met. DOS attacks. DOS stands for denial of service. It's basically a cyber attack where the attacker is going to find a way to shut down a machine, a service, a network, something that's going to make something not function. Now, a DOS is more of the older version of the newer attack, which is a DDoS, distributed denial of service. Because when you have a DOS, you have one machine attacking another machine. So it's a very straight line connection of attack, very straightforward. Still does damage, but again, it's a lot more. It's a lot more simplistic of an attack. The DDoS basically, it really steps it up. It's basically the DOS steroids. They're using multiple machines to attack one thing. And the machines, they're basically zombified. A lot of times these machines are machines from within your own network that are attacking you. It's a very scary thing to happen, because it could shut down your entire business. If you have a business that requires you to have internet at all times to make sure that you are able to process transactions, or that you are able to continue providing the service that your customers are paying you for, being shut down for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, hours, it could cost thousands, millions of dollars, depending on the size of the business, the size of the attack. So again, these are things that you have to be really watchful for, because they are incredibly destructive. There was actually an example of that. There's attackers that they targeted big banks we all know of, U.S. Bank, J.P. Morgan, Bank of America, places that most people have a bank account with. This was back in 2012. Their online and mobile banking services were disrupted. So the attacks, they actually came in waves. So it's not even just like a singular thing. That the attacks came in waves that occurred over the months of September and October. So you can imagine how much business or profit that these companies could have lost because of these attacks affecting, the different applications for users to be able to get on and use. Watering hole attacks. This is probably one of the scariest kinds of attacks. These are ones where it doesn't matter how vigilant you are, anybody can fall for these. This is typically going to be more of like a black hat level attack. You're going to have someone who's going into a very trusted website. It could be Facebook or whatever, right? Social media, something. And what they're doing is they're finding a vulnerability on that website, and they're planting a trap. And so as we, as users, as we go onto this website and we log into it, everything looks legitimate because it is in fact a legitimate website. But because they've had the hack, then anyone who logs into it, or if or even if they're only targeting like a certain set of those users, regardless, you're logging in and they're stealing your information, and there's no way to know. It's one of the most, I guess, unpredictable attacks, because there's just no way to really see that one coming. So there was one particular example of this with a attack group. They compromised Forbes.com. So again, very big company names, things that you're going to recognize. This isn't just some small website with like mediocre security. And basically what they did was that the Forbes has a little section where it's just called thought of the day. So you just click it and it just kind of gives you some random bit that's a thought of the day. Well, what it was, most people, they're used to it. So they go in and, it's probably just part of their morning routine or something. They're drinking their coffee in the morning, scrolling through their email. They're on Forbes.com. Oh, what's today's thought of the day? They click it, and yeah, they'll get today's thought of the day, but they also got some malware in the process. And that malware was enough to actually, it enabled the campaign to infect anyone using just the one vulnerable machine, and it caused pretty widespread damage. So again, these are things that and I keep saying this, but we really need to be careful of. Cybersecurity is a scary thing. DNS poisoning. This is kind of one of the things that we were talking about earlier. So DNS is what resolves a domain name like Google to its IP, so that way the internet knows where we're actually trying to go. This basically what this does is that they are affecting your protocol. So that way when you punch in google.com and you're supposed to go to an IP address of 1234, the DNS poisoning goes, you're going to go to 5678. And maybe that 5678 IP is a malicious website that again is going to look like a legitimate one, because that's the whole point. These are all different types of social engineering mixed in with a virtual attack. So you're going to go to this website that you're sure about because you even did it the safe way. You didn't click a link, you didn't follow anything, you didn't download any attachments. You went straight to the browser and you typed in the website that you know is correct, and it still takes you to a malicious website. And now, again, so you're at this website, you're logging in with your credentials, you're using your financial information, and all of it just got stolen and you have no idea. So now we're going to be talking about types of hackers. So know your enemy. The first hacker we're going to be talking about is a black hat hacker. You've heard us mention it a couple of times. This is the supervillain of hackers. They are highly skilled, they have extensive knowledge, and their intent is to wreck your system. They're going to use all kinds of different techniques, including the ones we've talked about today and various others that we don't have time to talk about, because again, the type of attack that they come at you with is really limited to just that particular hacker's imagination. And we all know people can be incredibly creative. Our next type of hacker is the white hat hacker. This is the superhero hacker. These are the good guys. These are the ones who will hack your system with your permission and with the specific purpose of testing your defenses and telling you how to become more secure, how to continue hardening your system. They are focused specifically on penetration testing, just like we discussed earlier. This is an ethical practice. They are going to try to launch different attacks, and they're even if they're able to get through, say, they launch a phishing attack and they are actually able to breach you, they're not going to steal your information. Again, the idea is just for testing in order to help your defenses. So they're going to get through, they're going to write up the results, they're going to send it to you and say, hey, this is how I got into your system, this is how you want to fix it. So these are great people to have. Typically, you're going to see they can either be employees, consultants. You can find them through different avenues. Highly recommended, just to make sure that your system is as secure as possible.
Yeah, and these guys really do a lot of the bulk of the work. On our side of the wall here, we're trying to keep people out, but white hat hackers are the ones who, when you hear on the news, there's this big new vulnerability in the Windows operating system, you have to update it. Most of the time, that's not Microsoft that's finding those things. That's white hat hackers that are finding these vulnerabilities and taking it to these big companies and saying, hey, you really need to patch this, which is a huge reason why updates are important, is because we have people out there that are going out of their way to try and find these things. There's massive security research firms that are analyzing what different types of malware do in their behavior, and they're constantly trying to poke holes in your firewall appliances and your computers and your smartphones and your smart devices. There's somebody who's out there right now that's probably trying to hack your smart fridge that plays Pandora. So these guys are really the linchpin of trying to stay ahead of bad actors. And it's really important to kind of recognize that there are people out there. Not all hackers are bad. Not all hackers are sitting in their basement with their hood up and an anonymous mask on, mashing out some keys all day. There's people who, wear dress shirts and ties to work every day, and they do the same thing, but, for good instead of evil.
Absolutely. So, the big takeaway from that, protect your smart fridges before someone goes on there and plays Nickelback on loop. Don't do that to yourself.
That'd be worse than the credit card stolen.
Absolutely. The red hat hacker. This is your anti-hero type. They're just as skilled as the white hat hackers, but their focus isn't so much defense and penetration testing. These are out to seek and destroy. So they're going to implement the same kinds of attacks that black hats do, but they're going to do it towards the black hat. So they're going to find a black hat's network and they're going to launch a DDoS attack. They're going to hit them with phishing and malware and ransomware and absolutely anything they can, because the idea is to crumble their network and stop this particular group from causing any more damage. So these are kind of the good guys that, I don't want to say that they're going extra because I can't really be mad at them for taking out some black hats, but these, again, anti-hero type. This is the main takeaway from that one.
They're not interested in discovering vulnerabilities. They're more interested in destroying people that are hacking from an unethical place. So I think that's really the big distinction, is that white hat hackers typically are focused more on defense and penetration testing and testing devices to see what vulnerabilities are out there. Red hat hackers are pretty much the guys that are running around the internet playing whack-a-mole with black hats.
Yes, that's a great analogy. That's exactly what that is. Then we have our green hat hackers. These are our beginner level hackers. They have some skills, they're still developing, but the main focus for a green hat is that their intention is to develop their skills. They want to get better. They want to become a black hat hacker and join this legion of doom of villains that that are out there to make to be top dog. Because amongst any community, you have a reputation. So and so shadow group is amazing at destroying companies and networks, and so that's what they're trying to do for themselves. They're trying to build their own reputation and becoming the best hackers they can be. And that's a scary thing when you have someone who's that determined to do something that is negative, and illegal. The next, we have the blue hat hackers. These are actually really similar to the green hats. These are very beginner level hackers. They're going to have some skills, but not too many. But their interest isn't so much learning, it's revenge. A blue hat hacker would be, like, for example, someone who's going to leave a logic bomb, like we discussed earlier. This employee is disgruntled, they got terminated, and so they just left you a logic bomb in your system. So as you're offboarding their laptop, as typical procedure goes, you just triggered their logic bomb, it goes off, and now it just deleted a bunch of sensitive files on your server. So that's the thing to be real careful of, which is why it's also really important to follow proper procedures and actually have procedures on how to do certain things for cybersecurity, which very important to consult your IT department for these kinds of things. If you don't have a dedicated IT department, look for MSP services or something that can assist you with some kind of consultation. Very important. And our final type of hacker that we're going over today, and again, these aren't even all the types of hackers, but these are going to be your common types of hackers that you're going to be seeing. These are called script kiddies. These are henchmen of hackers. They have no skill whatsoever, not even low level. They don't know anything. They're going on the dark web. They are purchasing different types of attacks. They're purchasing code and malware and all this, and this is what they're using to attack things. A lot of times, this is just a way to either get back at someone. This is a form of revenge, or this is a form of just like, hey, look what I can do, just because for the sake of I can, because they're under the veil of the internet. So, they can be very dangerous. There's probably going to be a lot more script kiddies than there are going to be like black hat hackers, but so they're not to be taken lightly, but they're not going to be as severe. It's just be mindful of them, essentially. All right, so what can you do today? Now, there's a few things you can do. The first big thing that you want to make sure that you're taking care of is just going to be your passwords. You want to make sure that you have a strong password. This is your first line of defense as a user. So all these attempts at phishing, all these attempts at doing all this, the reason they're hacking a human being and not technology is because it can be very hard to acquire this information. If you see here on the screen, if you have a really simple password, your password is dog. Well, anything that's 7 characters or less, there are tools out there where they can crack your very simple password in milliseconds. They can crack it in hours, in days. And you can see that adding just one extra character, and if you notice the example provided, there's no numbers, there's no special characters, there's no capital letters, or there's no lowercase, there's no differentiation. And so doing these little things, it adds exponential amounts of time as to how long it would take to crack this password. So a password that is just 12 characters with no numbers, no special characters, no uppercase, no lowercase, none of that jazz, it would take 2 centuries for one of these tools to crack. Ain't nobody got time for that. So What do? You can't crack the machine, you crack the person instead, which is why we have the entire concept of social engineering in the first place. So when you're thinking of making a strong password, what are best practices? You want to have a minimum of 10 characters. As you saw, 12 or more is also good, because even if you don't use the other best practices, it would take centuries for that, for that password to be cracked. But you want to have at least one lowercase, at least one uppercase, at least one number. You want to have at least one special character. You want to make sure you're changing your passwords on a regular basis. I know it's really common practice. Even I've been guilty of this in the past, where you just have one password for everything all the time. Yeah, it's convenient for us as individuals, but then you lose your password the one time. You get hacked one time, and they now have access to absolutely everything. You can imagine how terrifying that can be. This person can now access your mortgage and your power bills, your credit cards, and your social media, and everything about you. They can basically commandeer your life and become you until you get everything back. And you can only imagine how much destruction someone can do if they're in your shoes. So, you want to be mindful of these things. You also have multi-factor authentication. There's various versions of this. I actually have a version of this that I use for a lot of my logins that requires, it'll text my cell phone, it'll email my email, it'll send me a code, something for it to validate that not only do I need the password, but I also need the device, a completely separate device, to be able to plug in with the password. And that code is probably constantly changing. So I'll need all this together in order to gain access. It makes phishing, it takes the concept of phishing, it takes it to the next level of more security. So even if they steal your password, if there's multi-factor authentication, they still won't get access. And it's a great tool to have.
Yeah, I mean, just to touch on one little thing real quick on that note, multi-factor authentication is extremely important. Providing as many layers of security as you can between yourself and a potential attacker is extremely important. I did want to say that not all multi-factor authentication is created equally. SMS-based multi-factor authentication, that's where they send you a text message with here's your code, is actually becoming more and more exploitable every day through attacks called SIM swapping. It's basically where they steal your cell phone number. So just be aware that there's multiple layers to this. I'd also definitely advise getting a password manager, something like Dashlane or something of that nature, that allows you to create one single really, really hard to crack password that gives you access to all of your other randomly generated passwords. As we saw with the graphic on the previous slide, the more letters, numbers, special characters combination you have, the harder it is to get into your account.
All right, so for this one, it's just types of firewalls. A firewall can be actual hardware. It's just a box sitting on a network rack. It can be actual software like Norton antivirus or something. It can be both. And this is your network's first line of defense. So, popular vendors, as we discussed, we're going to be looking at things like Fortinets and Cisco's and Cradlepoints and Palo Alto's, Junipers. There's various different kinds. They're not all created equal. And you can do all kinds of research. Fortinets are fantastic. They're often kind of at the top of the list as far as some of the best devices you can have. And they're very important for network security. You want to make sure that those are the edge router, to make sure that any malicious content coming from the internet has to go through that first in order to get to your network, because the idea is that it won't go through it at all. And the last major thing that we can really specify as far as trying to keep your network safe, it's just be careful with what you click. As we mentioned, and the password being a perfect example, if they can't crack the machine, they're coming after you. And us as users, we can be tricked. They're going to use all kinds of social engineering. They're going to use authority. They're going to use intimidation. They're going to use trust. They're going to use all kinds of things to be able to get you to give them what it is they're looking for, that art of manipulation. And they're being more creative. Again, and best practices are going to be things like, if someone sends you an email saying, hey, I need you to go to this website, create an account for us so that we can start using this, within the company. Okay, cool. Don't click the link. Go straight to that website and access it through there. Someone sends you an attachment or someone sends you something, rather than following what was given to you, try to just go to the internet, search it for yourself, and that way you have a better chance of it being more legitimate. But I mean, as we discussed earlier, even that's not 100% foolproof. You could follow that practice and still fall into a watering hole attack, which is why that particular one is one of the scariest out there. But we as users, we have to be mindful to make sure that we're following best practices to not click anything that is suspicious. Mind yourself, don't get hustled. That's really the biggest thing.
So if you want more information, you can always engage with your RCN account manager. If you are not currently a customer of ours, feel free to give us a call. And we're always happy to take a look and help as best we can in order to assess your risk and help you create a cybersecurity plan based on your needs, your goals, whatever infrastructure you have. Obviously, with the pandemic, financial is very important, consideration these days, since we don't really know, am I going to be open? Am I going to be closed week to week? So you can always reach out to us, and we're happy to assist in that. Another thing that you can do, of course, is to invest in infrastructure with future-proof capabilities. Support emerging technologies, right? If you're still sitting on a Windows XP computer right now, you needed help in this area. We have to make sure that the newest stuff that's coming out as it's coming out is inherently more secure because it hasn't had more time to be researched and worked on by bad actors. They don't necessarily have an idea of how they would attack you. Things like 5G are inherently more secure because of how it's structured. And we have some content on that in our webinar library already, and I'm sure we're going to explore it more here in the future as 5G continues to emerge. Yeah, I mean, we can help. This is pretty much kind of our credentials. And if you have any questions, you can always contact us here at RCN or your account rep if you already are a customer.